Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Mueller investigation appears to be moving in directions that nobody could have anticipated, none of them obviously connected to Russian meddling in the past presidential election. So what is the point of all of this, and when and where does it end, if ever? Ken Starr and Joe DeGenova join us in a moment on that. But first tonight, freedom of speech. A lot of people voted for Donald Trump in the hope that they would have more of it. But 2 years in, the opposite has happened. Our ruling class has clamped down as never before on personal expression. Gone is the free exchange of ideas we were promised as Americans. It was supposed to be our birthright, remember? But in its place now, mandatory soul-deadening conformity. An entire population forced to repeat the same mindless platitudes or else. An axis of left-wing corporate power, academia, the media, and lawmakers have all aligned to curb your right to speak freely, which is to say, your right to think for yourself. When they control your words, they control your mind. The left used to deny that that was their goal. They're not pretending anymore. They're baring their teeth and snarling. Get in line or we'll hurt you. In a speech on Monday night, CEO Tim Cook pledged that Apple, one of the biggest and most powerful companies in the history of the world, will do whatever it takes to silence dissenting opinion.
Hate tries to make its headquarters in the digital world. At Apple, we believe that technology needs to have a clear point of view on this challenge. There is no time to get tied up in knots. That's why we only have one message for those who seek to push hate, division, and violence. You have no place on our platforms.
Hate. It's a real thing. There's a lot of it out there right now. But hate is also the word they use for views they don't like or questions they can't answer. Cook's real message is simple. We are holy, you are fallen, shut up and obey. CEOs didn't used to talk like this. They were in the business of selling products, not preaching sermons. Then, over time, conventional religion receded from public life, and people like Tim Cook and his fellow CEOs stepped forward to fill that void. It was not an upgrade. Apple has a lot more power than the Episcopal Church ever had, and much less humility and much less restraint. Leaders 100 years ago could tolerate dissent. They thought God would sort it out in the end. They didn't have to. Members of our modern ruling class consider themselves God. They render their own judgment. They view disagreement as equivalent to apostasy, an attack on the one true faith. In New York, to name but one example among many, a new bill in the state legislature would ban anyone who says something politicians don't like from buying a firearm. Prospective gun owners would be required to give up their passwords and to show their social media accounts to regulators who would inspect them for unapproved thoughts. Sound like something the Chinese military thought up? Yes, it does. But Democrats are not apologizing for it. Listen to one of the sponsors of the bill explain.
If we make this law and you have to allow the state government to, in fact, look at your social media posts, you could decide on whether you want a pistol license or not. You don't have to have a pistol license.
That's true. You don't. You don't have to vote either, or go to church of your choice, or be tried by a jury of your peers. What other constitutional rights will soon be contingent on saying the right things? To find out, we've invited Kevin Parker on the show tonight. He's the New York State Senator from Brooklyn. You just saw on that tape. Senator Parker, welcome. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So I should just say at the outset what I'm sure our viewers already know, which is it's already against federal law to sell firearms to the mentally ill, thank heaven, and I think all of us support that restriction. So it's already against the law. But what other constitutional rights that we as Americans possess should be contingent on how we behave on social media?
Well, let's be clear. I take an oath that supports the amendments and the whole Constitution, both the U.S. and the state government Constitution. And so this is really not about impinging on constitutional rights. This is really about safety. This is really about how do we, in fact, make the state of New York as safe as possible. Now, we've already been very safe. We're one of the top 3 safest states in the entire country, particularly when you look at, mass shootings, thank God. But we can always be safer, and we can always make sure that what happened in Pittsburgh, what we saw in Parkland, what we saw in Orlando doesn't happen here. And so this law simply says, let's look at what people are putting out on social media as a part of a set of criteria that we're using to determine who gets handguns. Because
but hold on, and by the way, I agree with your desire to make your state and every state as safe as we possibly can. But why restrict it to gun owners? I mean, you are an elected official. You're a state senator. You wield a lot of power. You control people's lives. Why shouldn't I have the password to your social media accounts so we can assess whether you should be wielding the power that you do?
Well, somebody should put that law in, and maybe we can do that. First of all,
but it's a sincere question.
Media,
would you send me your passwords?
Tucker, my social media is open right now. You can go on it and look at it. Anybody can look at it. It's public information, so people can look at my social media.
But hold on, why don't you send me your passwords and I'll find out how open it really is? You're requiring gun owners to give you their passwords. Why shouldn't they turn around and ask you for the same? That's a sincere question.
Look, what we should be talking about is how do we make the state of New York safe? And I'm simply saying, right now, we're not as safe as we can be because people are saying things on social media, and we're not using that and looking at that as we, in fact, give out a weapon that is used to kill people.
Okay, but I get what you're saying. I guess I'm just wondering why we're restricting it. I mean, as long as, and you've said that privacy is not a concern, and if you have concerns about privacy, don't carry a gun, don't buy a gun. Okay, but you're saying that that's the only category to which this applies. Why don't we apply it to voting?
Again,
before you vote and choose who runs the state, who controls your life, why shouldn't you have your social media checked? I'm not sure I understand.
Because voting doesn't necessarily lead to people killing each other. This is really about access to guns. No, this is about access to guns, and we know that there's a direct correlation with the number of guns that are available in states and the prevalence of mass shootings. We know that internationally as well.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt you. That's actually. That's not true. I think Wyoming has the highest per capita gun ownership in the country. I don't think there are any mass shootings in Wyoming.
With the five people who live in Wyoming and the guns that they have.
Okay, but there is not a correlation between those two.
There's absolutely. No, there's not. Tucker, there absolutely is. And we look at places like Japan. When we look at places like Japan and we look at places like Australia, they have much lower gun violence and especially mass shootings.
The question here is
exactly because they limit the number of guns that people have.
But you're not calling for limiting the number of guns in this bill. You're calling for people to turn over their social media passwords so you can decide whether they've said things that are naughty, and if they have, they don't get to own a gun. And so my question is, what other constitutional rights are dependent on your approval? Is the right to abortion? Should we, before allowing women to have abortions, check their social media accounts? This is a sincere question. And if not, why not?
Tucker, I'm really focusing on the issue of gun violence. There's too much gun violence in our communities, too much gun violence across the country.
Look, I agree.
And it's really
I'm against gun violence.
that we get it down.
But hold on. Who's going to make this? I mean, you're obviously not going to engage
the New York State Police.
The New York State Police.
The New York State Police.
But they'll just decide? Typically, before we determine someone is mentally ill, we adjudicate that person mentally ill. That's the term we use.
This is not about mental illness. This is in addition to the other...
What is it about?
In addition to the other criteria that the New York State Police will use, and they already use, to determine who should be eligible to get a gun permit. In addition to that, what I'm saying is we should also have the state police review the social media accounts of the people who are making the request.
And take the passwords, right. And so, but what would cause this, so the state police, independent of a judge, just get to decide whether you can have a gun or not based on whether or not they like what you've said on Facebook?
Well, the state legislature has the ability, with the signature of the governor, to in fact make law. And so if we make it the law, we then can in fact subscribe the power to the state police to make a determination.
It's just
which they do all the time, by the way.
Well, of course they do. Yeah, the police get to unilaterally decide whether we can exercise our constitutional rights. You're comfortable giving the police that power?
No, they're not unilaterally deciding. The state legislature is actually deciding.
The state legislature is handing over to them the power to decide.
That's in fact not. No, exactly.
So in every case, exactly.
But we do that. But they already have that power right now.
Right. Okay.
At this very moment, the state police decide who gets a gun and who doesn't get a gun. Let me ask you a
human question. Do you think it's a little intrusive that the government would be forcing citizens to turn over their social media passwords to the police before doing something the Constitution guarantees them the right to? That doesn't bother you in any way? That doesn't seem a little bit, say, totalitarian or something that maybe China would do?
Tucker, we make legislation through a process. all the things that you have objected to, there are lots of people who object to it. There's conversations that are going on. Maybe
yeah, I can't let you skirt the third question in a row.
I'm not skirting it. I'm saying what I'm saying to you is that there's an opportunity.
I'm aware. I know how government works.
So there's an opportunity for us to work together to, in fact, look at this. Maybe the passwords
You've written this bill, and these are your proposals. So this is not theoretical. It's something that you came up with. And I'm just asking you, as you sat at your laptop and typed out, you will be required to hand over your passwords to the state police. And if they don't like what you say, you don't get to exercise your rights. Did part of you think, boy, that sounds a little Orwellian to me.
Right now, you're focusing on the part that's actually quite not the whole bill, right? So the big thing is to review social media.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean, it's not the whole bill. Exactly.
It's not the whole bill. It's not the whole bill, but it's part of it.
Right, it's part of it. And you don't see that as fascist in any way. Are there any other decisions that, I mean, should the state police have to sign off on your marriage, do you think, or how many kids you can have? Would that be, I mean, because obviously some people shouldn't be getting married.
Right, but what we're again concerned about is the safety of the people in the state of New York, and we're concerned that people are getting shot down.
I'm not going to get you to think critically about this. Obviously.
No, well, I know what I'm doing. What I'm doing is talking about the values, and I get that some people believe that having a gun is more important than protecting the lives of strangers.
No,
but it's my job as a state legislator to, in fact, to do both.
Last question.
Yes.
Do you think that people have a right to say outrageous things, maybe even things you disagree with, in public? Do you think that behavior is...
They certainly can say whatever they want to say, but we also have the right. We also have a right to deny them a gun permit if, in fact, we believe that the things that they're saying may lead to them endangering the people of the state of New York.
It may or may not. I mean,
frankly, the Supreme Court has already said that some speech.
If you say something naughty,
for instance, we limit speech all the time, like pornography, particularly child pornography, right?
Child pornography has not been ruled to be speech. And actually, I would refer you to Brandenburg versus Ohio in 1967, which is the final word on speech from the Supreme Court, since you're interested. And it allows all speech except speech that calls for imminent violence. All speech.
Like getting a gun and running into a synagogue, right? That I would call that imminent violence, right? So
that's not speech. In fact need that's violence.
Again, so then we have.
Now you're really scaring me.
So we have to limit violence, and I'm saying you limit violence. By limiting the kind of, we have to limit violence
and eliminating privacy.
No, come on.
Okay. All right, come on, give me your password. All right, I'm going to send you my text, and you text me your Facebook password. I'm going to assess what I think of it, and we can talk about it tomorrow.
Great.
Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.
Good to see you.